Took a vow in summertime, now we find ourselves in late December. I believe that New Year's Eve will be the perfect time for their great surrender, but they don't remember. Anger wants a voice, voices won't sing. Singers harmonize till they can't hear anything. Thought that I was free from all that questioning, but every time a problem ends, another one begins. And the stone walls of harmony all bear witness. Anybody with a word in mind can never forgive the sight of wicked snakes inside a place.
That is the sound of Vampire Weekend, which is not what's happening to you this weekend. It's actually the name of a band. You should know that. They're incredibly popular. They've been around a little bit more than 10 years now. They have had 2 consecutive number 1 albums. Their last 2 albums have gone number 1 on the Billboard Hot whatever 200. And this one, Father of the Bride, may do very much the same thing. They are the weird, almost paradoxical thing, a popular indie band. Like a really popular indie band. So joining us here in the studios of our New Haven studios for the Nose, this is so exciting. So the reason we're down here in New Haven mainly is because Pizza, a Love Story, which for filmmaker Gorman Bechard, it's like his Chinese Democracy. He's been working on it for quite a few years now, and everybody's like been asking each other on the streets, is it ready yet? It's coming out. When is it ready? So Pizza, a Love Story, which is his documentary Serenade to the Pizza of New Haven, will have its New Haven premiere at this year's NH Docs, the New Haven Documentary Film Festival, on Saturday, June 1st. There'll be more information at n-hdocs.com. And you should look there because there's all kinds of other stuff happening, and famous people are coming here. Michael Moore's coming here.
Michael Moore will be here for 3 days.
Penny Baker is coming here.
Penny Baker,
yeah, all these people. So Gorman Bechard is here as a member of the Nose panel. Also with us, Lucy Gelman, editor of the Arts Paper and host of WNHH Radio's Kitchen Sink, that's SYNC. And Brian Slattery is arts editor for the New Haven Independent and a producer at WNHH Radio. And I think relevantly, a musician.
Yes. Finally relevant.
Well, no, it's frequently relevant. We are going to begin by talking about Vampire Weekend and sort of like, the migration that certain acts make from being critical darlings and understood to be cool and in style to becoming out of style. And it's often a very short trip these days. We'll also talk, so we're going to talk first about Vampire Weekend, then about Gorman's documentary, and I think by extension about New Haven Pizza and its cult-like standing. I don't know where to begin. So we should just, the history of Vampire Weekend, I think 10, 12 years ago, they were formed at an Ivy League school, Columbia University. I think if you're sitting there going, I don't know who this is, I've never heard of Vampire Weekend, and I don't know any of their music, we're going to play something, and like a third of you are going to go, okay, they do that. Lucy Gelman is over there just sobbing with all the memories that this song brings back. The opening salvo by Vampire Weekend really did stir your soul, I believe.
It did. It totally did. So I discovered, in air quotes or whatever, I started listening to Vampire Weekend, I think when I was a junior or a senior in college, and I really loved them. I really thought it was genuinely good and interesting and intellectual music. And I will say Vampire Weekend played a really big role in probably my first significant relationship. I remember evenings spent listening to Vampire Weekend, talking to friends who also really enjoyed Vampire Weekend. When I eventually broke up with this person, Vampire Weekend was sort of unfortunately the soundtrack to our breakup. And then I remember listening to Vampire Weekend on a plane when I was headed abroad for the first time in my life. And so it kind of has scored major events in a way that maybe I didn't expect and I didn't think about until this album. But I will say, not to jump the gun, but when I moved to New Haven, that was the first time I really started listening to and reviewing live music. So I didn't do that until way after grad school. And that was this moment where I thought, oh my goodness, I've been so very wrong about so many. I mean, I really liked Mumford and Sons, which is a whole other thing. But I thought I've been so wrong. This is what good music. When I was going to live music shows of groups that had much smaller profiles than Vampire Weekend, this is really what music is supposed to sound like. And I will say Brian Slattery has uniquely and wonderfully ruined Vampire Weekend for me.
Although he may be going in the other direction right now too. I just want to say the Mumford and Sons thing I think isn't a whole other thing, in the sense that Mumford and Sons was famously dismissed by somebody as posh boys with banjos.
Yeah.
And these are kind of posh boys with a lot of world music instruments, which is not to say that they're vapid and bad and stuff like that.
No, it is.
For that point of view, I will now ask Gorman, and I should say that Brian is a musician. Gorman has made a number of documentaries about rock groups like The Replacement and Archers of Loaf, so he's a great lover of popular music. Lucy has just discovered disclosed her introduction to Vampire Weekend. What was it like for you? I already know the answer.
Yeah,
to this
well,
question.
I mean, when it first came out, the album got it was back then it was New Release Tuesday, not New Release Friday. I remember I got the album, and there was such a hype about it. I put it on, I played it. I played it actually 3 times in a row, trying to find one note that could, justify the existence of this record. I basically thought that it was everything that was bad about rock and roll music. It was they were the poster boys. And then when you see them on Saturday Night Live and they're all wearing their matching V-neck sweaters that look like they probably knitted themselves, I realized that it's like not only they literally took rock and roll, they held it up by its throat and with a dull butter knife castrated it, and they unfortunately then gave way to some more, just so many horrible copycat bands like Fun Period, I guess, however you want to say their name, and other bands of that ilk, and it was just one wimpy band after another, and you wanted to just take these people and run them over with a pickup truck.
All right. So, Brian, I'm not even going to ask you a question. I'm going to let you respond.
There's so much middle ground for me to just wander around
in. A huge amount of terrain is open to you right now.
So, when the first Vampire Weekend album came out, being a musician and a huge music nerd, I was already a huge fan of lots of different kinds of African music. So, when I first heard their album, I thought, oh, I know what records they listen to. Nice try, guys. And that was kind of about it. And the other part of it was that some of it really rubbed me the wrong way. Like one of the titles of their songs in the first album is Cape Cod Kwassa Kwassa. So Kwassa Kwassa is a dance style from the 80s, from Congo. And the idea that they were grafting this onto Cape Cod struck me as like the sort of the way that college students can inadvertently be racist. It felt like that to me. It was like, oops, you've stepped on a huge cultural landmine that you're not even aware of because you probably didn't leave campus very much. And that was sort of how I felt about their first album. That said, like having listened to the most recent album, I do feel like they've digested their influences a little bit more, which makes sense given it's been like a decade, and it's cool to see that they are like if you told me that they didn't have any world music influences, I would believe you. There's actually not a lot of them on this album.
No, I think at times it sounds like, to me,
it sounds more like they listen to a lot of 70s R&B.
To me, it sounds like they listen to a lot of Wilco and maybe even the Grateful Dead. They sound like the Grateful Dead with a plan.
There's totally some Grateful Dead going on. And there's some things I really like about the way that they play. Like, for example, I love that they don't just hit all 6 strings of the guitar all at once, all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
That rules. I'm so into the bands that don't, just strum away. So So there's things
Lucy,
I really
you noticed that, right? That they don't hit all 6 strings. I had no idea what he's talking about.
I did actually. Can I share a really
Yes.
quick
Yes,
anecdote?
you
So
may.
this is also
Yes.
about how Spotify has ruined our ability to listen to music and to free associate. But on Spotify, I was listening to the album, and Spotify does this thing where it tries to go on to similar music once you've finished listening to something. And I thought, wow, I just listened to this album I didn't really like, but this song is really good. And then I realized it was the Shins, and that it was no longer Vampire
yeah.
Weekend. So and I had a little laugh
but
about that.
I do feel like this album suffers from being overlong. It's 18 songs, and
It's almost an hour.
it's really that's like a long time,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And there's like this is like the typical criticism of lots of long albums, but there's basically a much better shorter album that's about half as long,
There's a slattery cut.
sitting inside
right.
this larger album.
There's an 8-song
you know.
slattery cut, which is Harmony Hall, This Life, Sunflower, Bambina, Rich Man, Jerusalem, New York, Berlin, Unbearably White, and maybe a little bit
And then half
shorter
of one
version
of the
Hold
other
You
ones.
Down. Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, there's a reason that vinyl albums had 20-minute sides. I mean, that was it. 40 minutes
Yeah,
is the
yeah.
perfect length for an album.
Yeah.
It's a good length.
Yeah.
It's a good
There,
length.
there are a lot of throwaways. I mean, I think you've made this point too, Brian, that a lot of songwriters these days don't get rid of the chaff, right? Like, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, I even think Elvis Costello is a little bit guilty of this. There's
I
some
agree.
songs that he writes that are not that good, and they wind up on albums. Ani DeFranco, I don't think has ever thrown a song away, ever. You know, and these guys don't seem to have done it this time either.
Yeah, which is really something because like the songs all they sound there's a bunch of them that sound really similar to each other, and then you listen to them side by side and go like, well, this is just like this song except it's a better version of it. So why did you put the not as good version also on it?
Okay, I think.
You know.
Oh, can you just hold the thought for a second?
Of
Actually, no.
course.
Say it, and then I want to try an experiment on Gorman.
Oh, I mean, I was going to say there is this really interesting contrast, though, of maybe gratuitous material and very sleek production value. Like, it was too slick for me.
That's something that I really detest in most music.
Yeah.
today,
I
is-
wanted it, like, I like rough edges. I think that
yeah.
can be nice in music.
I want it to sound like it was recorded in your bathroom on like an old cassette
But that's,
player.
I mean, don't you have to at a certain point accept what an artist is trying to do?
No.
No. Okay. Okay. I mean
We could have like this whole conversation about
Right.
production values
Yeah.
and what they mean and
Right.
signify and
yeah.
all of those
I mean,
things.
years and years ago, I was a
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
really bad rock critic, and that was my problem. I couldn't just accept what the artist was trying to do. I just so I didn't like Van Halen. Van Halen was really good at being Van Halen. I just didn't particularly like that kind of stuff. So
They're
and-
devastatingly good at it though.
Yeah, they're really good at it. So, and I should have acknowledged that. And that's so. So I'm going to play what I think is the most catchy and fun, like, you know, bustling around the kitchen kind of song. And I'm going to see if Gorman can maintain his hatred for it for like a full 70 seconds. This is called Stranger.
Things have never been stranger. Things are gonna stay strange. I remember life as a stranger. But things change. Another night indoors, another sign of life, wobbling up through the floor. You ain't a doubter. I might get low, but now I'm too high to know.
All right, this is a mistake because, like, in the car, I really like this song, but sitting next to Gorman listening to it, it sounds very weak to me.
It makes a boy band like NSYNC sound like Black Flag.
NSYNC they were very good at what they were trying to do, you know?
They're amazing at what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
In sync.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't hate this album. I think Brian's right that it's too long, and there are songs that are not that good. There are songs where there's a song called. Oh, I've already forgotten the name of it, but it's the one that has like the crashing cymbals at
Do you
the
want
end.
to sing it? You could sing it.
I could sing it, yeah.
Sympathy. It was sympathy.
Sympathy, yeah. And so Sympathy has like all this little weird production stuff and this little tapey stuff, you know, where
Right.
he's like saying some kind of consonant sound and it cuts off and it doesn't really seem to add up to anything. It just seems
Yeah,
like
I wasn't
he's
a fan of the lo-fi stuff on this album. It felt a little awkward.
Even
I didn't understand what it was doing there, I guess.
Yeah, even listening to Stranger, there's this when you're listening to good brass, there's this really sweet spot, I feel like, when the brass comes in and you're like, yeah, yes, this is it. And that it does nothing.
We're a long way from an Al Green record.
Well, I mean, you know what it is to me? You know
we're
how
a
like
long
Greta
way.
Van Fleet sounds like a bunch of kids that just sort of listened to a Led Zeppelin record and then tried to make one? I feel that that's, it's like, I remember back then, to me, the comparisons to Graceland, which I always thought was a spectacular, perfect record, were insulting. I mean, really insulting.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely the way that Paul Simon had the brilliant move of just hiring this amazing band for that album. So those
And another amazing band for Rhythm of the Saints too.
Absolutely, and the big thing that they have going for them that Vampire Weekend doesn't is that those guys, their rhythm was just impeccable. It's tight as a drum, and Vampire Weekend has never managed to actually get that tight as a band, which is the main reason why they can't quite pull off the whole world music thing. Is you have to have a better sense of rhythm than that.
The other question that I had was, and I know very little about Vampire Weekend, or at least I knew very little about it when we went down this road. But my sense is that they are also a little bit known for their lyrics, and that Ezra Koenig, who's the front man of the band, has something to say. And so I was making an effort to try to figure out what it was that he had to say. And that really, I actually do like a lot of the songs on this album. I sort of like the Slattery cut on this album. I'll probably put a few of these songs on playlists and stuff like that. I like them enough to do that. But there is, for example, a song called We Belong Together that has lines like, we go together like Keats and Yeats, like bulls and plates. And I said to Brian earlier, if they're trying to write a really stupid song and intentionally do something, because Paul Simon will do that sometimes too. He'll write a song that he's trying to be kind of stupid in an amusing way. Well, then that's good, because that's really stupid.
Yeah, or the Black Eyed Peas. I always think of them as the kings and queens of the wonderfully stupid song.
Yeah, and so there's sort of that. There are lines that he does sort of little punchy lines, we got married in a gold rush, the rush was never the same, or there was one, I don't want to live like this, but I don't want to die, or something like that. And that I can live with that. But there was one that I'm paraphrasing, and I mean I get it exactly right anyway, which is, we learned that our disease is the same as the trees, unaware that they were living in the forest. And I thought, that's a pretty high standard to hold trees to, but they're supposed to know that they're living in a forest.
Yeah, and I still don't know what the disease is.
But I think the trees are aware that they're living. I mean, this is a different show.
You think he's
entirely,
dumping on
but-
trees?
Yeah,
unfairly.
I do.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that our ecosystem is incredibly intelligent and sensitive, but that's
Which makes it
But
that
I
much
don't
harder
think
to be
they are.
vegetarian.
I don't think Vampire Weekend is. That's the
Intelligent and
problem.
sensitive.
no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Trees, yes. Intelligent. Trees could probably make better music.
The trees say they like the first album better.
Yeah.
They've listened to all
Exactly.
all four Vampire Weekend albums. Well, there's a sort of a subset here, which is how we decide. I mean, we're trying to have a critical conversation right now, but there's also a way in which sort of things become cool or they become less cool. And Vampire Weekend's an odd instance, because there were, Lucy was probably at the perfect target demo moment for Vampire Weekend, so she really liked it when it came out. There were a lot of people 10 years older than you right then, but similar to you, who were kind of hating them for some of the Bouchard reasons. They are posh boys in V-neck sweaters, ripping off albums that that Brian already has the but now we're all kind of crossing in the night here. You're crossing over to the anti-vampire side, and Brian's pro-vampire a little bit more than he used to be, and Gorman will go on hating them until the end of time.
Yes. I promise.
And I just sort of wonder about that, how we make those kinds of decisions too. How we decide something that maybe even we used to like is all wrong now. For you, Lucy, you say it was just exposure to other stuff.
I think for me, a huge amount of it was exposure to live music. And I actually think, if anything, it's a case study for why people should be exposed to live music in whatever city they're living in. Because I don't think I realized how much talent, actual musicians who I'm not saying they're not actual musicians, but I don't think I was as sensitive to how much talent people have to have, especially to give a live show. And I've seen some really good live shows from big bands. Before we were on, Mike Gorman and I were talking about how the Decemberists actually give a very good show. And they're another band in sort of the same vein where people have said, oh, they're very literary, they're very smart. But I'm sure that lots of folks have issues with them too.
They may be suffering a little bit too from the fact that popular music is really quite good right now. There's a lot of
like when you say popular music,
like there's
you're not
people,
talking about Shawn Mendes or maybe you are.
No, I mean probably like the gold standards for this would be like Kendrick Lamar, right? Where he sells millions of records and makes amazing albums.
Right.
And there's several people who are like that right now. That a lot of people are hearing a lot of really good stuff, and that's a thing that's changed a little bit in the last 10 years. Like we're at a pretty fun point for popular music. So good luck to you, Vampire Weekend.
But
you know?
that goes in waves. I mean,
Absolutely.
if you go back to the beginning of the 90s.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, Nirvana sort of changed the face of what we were listening to in rock and roll, and you know, here was essentially a punk band. You know, with number one hits.
Right. I also think that time alters our perceptions. Not about Nirvana, like everybody got Nirvana at the time. People probably haven't changed that much about Nirvana. But as I pointed out in some of the emails we were sending, so John Dankosky is sort of Gorman Bechard North, you know. So we live up in Hartford under the weight of the baleful eye of John Dankosky and certain songs he doesn't like. In fact, Tucker Ives and I have talked about doing a podcast called Songs John Dankosky Doesn't Like, you know, and there's sort of a lot of them. But, I mean, the list from the 90s includes, I'm pretty sure this is fairly accurate, Spin Doctors, Sugar Ray, Gin Blossoms, Hootie and the Blowfish, Bare Naked Ladies, Third Eye Blind, Goo Goo Dolls. I could continue. And then, like, some of those bands, you know, you probably hated all those.
No, I thought the first three Goo Goo Doll records are freaking amazing.
Yeah.
But then
do you still feel that way?
The first three, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And then the fourth was when they sort of just started going for that major label hit.
Right.
You know,
I mean, I credit my lack of interest in 90s music for the reason I got into African music in the first place. You know, it's like, well, there's nothing good on the radio, so I might as well look for something I do like. And off I went, never to return.
But I think, like, to Lucy's point, times change, too. Like, you know, some of those bands I kind of liked in the 90s, and I don't know if I would really seek out a Bare Naked Ladies song at this point.
No, I mean, it's also we're living at a point where I think music is more accessible than it has been, and it's.
Yes.
I mean, it's interesting because people also go back to vinyl. Vinyl's still in the midst of riding this huge resurgence, which is very exciting. But at the same time, I can log onto my computer or an app on my phone and see what albums NPR Music is talking about. And I did that this morning, and they're talking about the new Jamila Woods album. And so immediately I'm listening to something that maybe during the 90s I wouldn't have had the same access to as just a kid with a radio.
Yeah, and I also feel like, these things also go in waves. The other example that I think of, I knew I was a bad rock critic when U2 came on the scene, and I didn't like him and I didn't get him. And I even had a phone conversation with Bono where I told him he was going to lose his voice if he kept singing like that. And then like everybody thought U2 was really great, and I realized I was a bad rock critic. But now people don't so much anymore, right?
Yeah. You were ahead of your time.
Well, no, I was just stupid. But like, but if you wait long enough, you will come into fashion.
See, I've seen them twice, and we walked out probably 5 songs in both times. So, and that once was, my God, New Haven Coliseum, probably the second album.
Yeah.
And then years later at the Hartford Civic Center, and it was just
not good.
Yeah, and in the first instance, they probably had New Haven Pizza in the green room, based on your documentary.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm not a big fan. If you're going to be hitting light cues, you're not a rock and roll band anymore. You're a Broadway show.
Yeah. Well, so that's another thing we hold against people is self-seeking, either commercially or, you know, getting too slick, I guess. And maybe Vampire Weekend has that problem now. All right, so we should take a break now so we have plenty of time to talk. It's been long in the making. We don't want to shortchange it now. Pizza, a Love Story, coming up after this.
That genocidal feeling that beats in every heart. A wicked world, just think what could have been. Jerusalem, New York, Berlin. All I do is lose, but baby, all I want's to win.
If you haven't been to New Haven and had Pepe's, Sally's, and Modern, you really can't talk about pizza with any authority, I don't think.
Sally's.
Modern.
Pepe's.
Sally's.
Pepe's first.
Modern.
There's great things about each of them, and I don't like to take sides in the pizza war.
You have to go with Sally's.
It's always Sally's.
Oh, Sally's.
Sally's.
I was raised on Sally's.
By far, Sally's.
I like Sally's.
Sally's, basically.
And if I had to choose between the three, I would choose Modern.
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 Modern our beats.
Right here, Frank Pepe's, best pizza in the world.
Pepe's.
Pepe's Pizza.
I'm a Pepe guy.
Pepe's.
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 Pepe's. I love Pepe's. Yay! Pepe's.
Sally's, Pepe's, or Modern?
Yes.
Do you think there's a huge learning curve when you're sitting down for that first pie?
There is a learning curve because people will, oh, why is it cut like this? Why is it shaped like this? Why is it burnt? And I bet when they say, why is it burnt, a little part of you, your heart stops. And you say, oh, we need to educate these people right now that this is not burned, this is char, this is the beauty, this is what this pizza is all about.
All right, that, of course, is from Pizza, A Love Story, the long-awaited documentary from Gorman Bechard, who's sitting right next to me here in our New Haven studios. Pizza, A Love Story has its New Haven premiere at this year's NH Docs, the New Haven Documentary Film Festival. That'll be Saturday, June 1st. The New Haven Documentary Film Festival is 11 days of free documentary films in New Haven, with 3 days of Michael Moore showing and talking about 7 of his films. First time he's ever done that. It all starts May 30th. Almost 120 films in all, plus panels, some of them moderated by Lucy Gelman, workshops, a student film competition, musical performances, vegan food trucks, that's so New Haven, and also appearing at this year's NH Docs, D.A. Pennybaker, Chris Hegedus, Laura Poitras, Gorman Bechard himself, of course. More info at nhdocs.com. All right, so should we talk about Gorman like he's not here? We could do that. That would be fun.
First off, did you realize I announced this documentary on your show in 2008?
Right. 2008, you said that you were going to do this. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, so I book a little free time in 2010. I'll watch this movie. Why? I mean, actually, in all seriousness, that's a long time to be working on a movie. And you were doing a lot of other projects while you were doing that. Was it the other projects that got in the way, or you couldn't get the rights to that Seinfeld clip? Or
No,
like,
no.
You know?
It was that Pepe's is very well documented. Trying to find pictures of Modern from 1938, or which wasn't even called Modern then, or Sally's from that era, really difficult. And it wasn't until we came, Dean Falcone's my co-producer on this, it wasn't until Dean and I found this historian named Colin Kaplan,
Mm-hmm.
who is just a whiz with pictures, and we started really putting it together.
So, Lucy, we've all now watched individually this documentary. So, I don't know, just react.
Oh, I think it's fantastic. I have shared this with Brian and Gorman, but I don't love pizza, and it's not because I have a particularly cold heart. It's because pizza is this unique combination of ingredients that tend to make me physically unwell. Mm-hmm. I have sensitivities to gluten, to tomato, and to cheese. And so when you put them all together, it's a difficult thing. But I loved this because when I arrived in New Haven, one of the first things I heard about was these pizza wars. And I really thought people were pulling my chain. I thought, oh, this isn't a real thing. And then I quickly discovered that it was. And I will say pizza, I think for many New Haveners and for me, has played an important role in my life in the city. Sally's was one of the first places I went when I lived here. I was living with a couple. I had no friends. I didn't really know them very well. And that evening was kind of the first time I was like, okay, I'm in the right place. I'm going to be okay. And there was Fox and Park Soda involved. And I told Gorman this every year. I break Passover with Modern Pizza, a veggie bomb, which is very good, and with beer, which is not related to this documentary.
But not unrelated to it
Not
either.
unrelated either, because what are you going to drink with pizza?
What about you, Brian? Just go ahead.
So my relation to New Haven pizza is that I moved here from New York City, where I was led to believe was where the best pizza in the country was. And then had my first bite of a Sally's pie and was like, no, this is it. This is the best pizza. I was a born again pizza eater. Like, I understand fundamentalist Christianity because of my zealotry for the pizza. I'm not even exaggerating, because next to playing music, eating is my favorite thing to do. And pizza is among one of my favorite things to eat.
Right. And so Pepe's is the Father, Sally's is the Son, and Modern is the Holy Ghost.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I am living in the New Jerusalem of eating. And so this documentary, I laughed, I cried a little every once in a while.
I got a little choked up too during this. I did not expect that to happen.
It was great. It was great, and all of the great stories to come out about. I loved the way that it wove the history of the pizza with the history of the city, and because half my family is Italian American, there's the constant sort of just like, these people are my relatives. Yeah. They remind me constantly of my own family, which is delightful. I love the atavistic nature of it. I love the idea of they're going to stay open late for Frank Sinatra, but the president can take a hike, that kind of stuff.
So we should say also,
I love it.
This documentary is full of all kinds of New Haven people, New Haven characters that Brian and Lucy probably know that I don't, and food experts and foodies and chefs and also like some celebrities.
It is wonderful to hear politicians and touring musicians talk about what they don't do.
Right.
Yes. You see Chris Murphy as a human being talking about pizza, and Rosa DeLauro as a human being, and Lyle Lovett, as if I couldn't love him anymore, is
the first person you
ravishingly eloquent.
Yeah, first person you see or hear in this movie is Lyle Lovett. I'm a huge Lyle Lovett fan. We'll go see him at the drop of a hat, and I have seen him talk from the stage about. In fact, there's a picture of him in the movie holding a New Haven pizza box, and I'm thinking, I feel like I might have even been at that show, or maybe
that was
it happens
College
a lot.
Street, probably about 2 years ago.
So. And he's also one of the last. There's one kind of soliloquy that you have him doing near the end, where he talks like very poetically about how the crust
accepting
the sauce. And he really is a poet about. If you've ever heard him talk about Mexican food, you realize this is not confined to pizza. He's obviously a poet about food and very particular about which foods he eats. But I don't know. Did you have like a thing that you got, like an interview that you got that really made you super happy as a filmmaker?
The Lyle Lovett was wonderful, because I remember just smiling as he's saying these lines, because there are just so many amazing things.
Right.
Every once in a while, someone will tell that story. Even Michael Bolton.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Bolton talking about skipping the lines.
You're right.
And because the only person
that was a good story that made Michael Bolton cooler.
Yeah. That he can skip the lines, or that he feels bad about it.
His whole relationship to skipping the line, that was really delightful.
And how you have to keep your head down, not make eye contact. That was great. It goes back to Brian's point of, you really realize that these are people and they're not talking about what they do, and it's fun.
In the whole thing of, here he is playing his favorite place, Royal Albert Hall in London, and a friend's wife brings 6 pizzas from Sally's, and it just completely, they forget about where they're playing, they forget about everything. It's all about the pizza.
I want to come back to the movie in just a second, but when you guys started emailing, and so in order to make this movie, you really do have to set up that holy trinity of those three and put them in opposition, put them as uniters and dividers. People are united in their worship of New Haven pizza, but they are very divided about what's the best. I think it's mostly fun to argue about what's the best as opposed to anything else. But you guys, just for people who are listening who don't know New Haven pizza that well, you guys started mentioning some other places, particularly Old World. Is that
Old World?
Yeah.
Old World's in Hamden, and it opened about 20 years ago or so. And it really is. It's one of the guys from Modern, and he opened up a place, and it is.
One of my friends calls them the Modern refugees.
Oh, I actually call it Modern Light. But it is probably. To me, there are 3 great pizza places on the planet. I consider that it's like 3A.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same.
The other thing that was a surprise to me, Gorman, was how many places there are around the country that now claim to be serving New Haven pizza, and that's a meaningful thing to claim if you're in Chicago or San Francisco or someplace like that.
Well, it's the Peace Pizza. If someone from Guilford opens up a restaurant a pizza restaurant in Chicago, and it becomes the single most successful standalone pizza restaurant in the country. That says pretty much everything.
Yeah. And Lucy, it's interesting that you sort of saw pizza as an on-ramp to getting to know New Haven, getting to know people in New Haven.
Yeah.
Because in some ways it could be kind of off-putting too. Like there's this huge, you should pardon the expression, encrusted story that you know, I mean, it's there in Gorman's documentary. This has been going on for decades, and people have all their little idiosyncratic preferences, and you could feel a little left out of the whole thing. But maybe nobody's left out of it.
No, I don't think people are left out of it. I mean, it is what I come back to with pizza every time is it is a modest food. It's a humble food and a cheap food. And most people really enjoy it. So it's kind of this, and Gorman, I think you made this point, that it's one of the very few foods that people share. So, of course, there are family-style dinners, and that's a different thing. But this is literally a shared food where you're cutting for different, or maybe the restaurant cuts for you, or I should say the establishment, because there's a whole discussion about whether an establishment and a restaurant are the same thing. But yeah, I think that's definitely true. And it is a food. It's a food that seems very democratic too. It's one of the only things. So I and a colleague teach young journalists, and it's one of the things that they'll open up about when we teach them. One of our first questions is, "What's your favorite pizza?" And actually, usually it's rarely one of the Holy Trinity, which maybe is blasphemous. But all of a sudden they get a little friendlier. They don't think we're these, I don't know, scary, imposing people. I've recently realized that they think I'm really old, which is something I'm also dealing with. But
to the point that you made at the beginning, I think it's Gordon Ramsay in the movie who says that you don't even get plates, right?
Right.
You don't even. I don't know if that's true at all three.
That's at
places,
Sally's.
but at Sally's.
The other places, Pepe's gives you paper plates, so does Modern.
Yeah.
But most people I know don't even use them. They
Right.
eat off the trays.
Right.
Yeah, there's sort of an incidental.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I have a million questions about this movie, but I also want to get a few more reactions here from the panel. I don't know. Brian, did you have a particular? I guess your favorite moment is the Sinatra story. Maybe you should just quickly sort of flesh that story out a little bit.
There were a lot of favorite moments. Yeah, that's one of them. One of them is that it turns out that Frank Sinatra, he was like, I have to remember like the setup for this thing. But he was playing in New Haven. And right, they're hungry after a gig, which, by the way, true story. Like, every time any musician plays music, the first thing they think of when they stop is, like, what they're going to eat.
Yeah.
It's just a thing. So that whole story rings so true.
Well, you should tell about the Argentine guys.
Oh, my little story.
Yeah.
So, in fact, just this week, I was hosting a band from Argentina. They're touring the Northeast, and they're heading south. They're called Che Apalache. And the first time they had come through town, they were in a real rush, so I got them pizza from Old Worlds because it's close to my house, and they were like, "This is the best." I was like, "So actually, it's not the best. The next time you come back, I should take you to one of the places that we think is the best." So I took them to Pepe's for lunch because one of the people in the bands was intrigued by the whole white clam pie thing. So we went there, and we're waiting. And the service is slow because that's how it is. Mm-hmm. And they're just going like, wow, the service is slow. I was like, just wait. It's going to be worth it. And we're sitting and we're talking. Finally, the pizza arrives. And I watch as they all take their first bite. And there's this sort of like light in their eyes, you know. And I said, so a lot of people think this is the best pizza in the country. Is this the best pizza you've ever had? And one of them goes, yes. without even, without batting an eye.
I always relate the first bite to we've all seen, or hopefully we've all seen the movie Train Spotting, where everyone's shooting up heroin and their eyes roll back in their head and they just fall back.
Oh, yeah.
That's what someone's
absolutely.
First bite, I believe, of New Haven pizza really looks like when I bring in out-of-towners.
There is that whole idea, though, of like this, and this is in the movie, the slow service. And although I don't find that to be the case at Modern. Modern is probably the place I usually go, and they
do. They speed
get you in and out of there pretty fast. But there's this idea that you should suffer. That the suffering is part of it. You should. I mean, unless you're Gorman Bechard or Michael Bolton, you have to wait in this 1-2 hour line at Sally's. But that's somehow or other folded into the experience. Although I've never completely been able to embrace that idea.
I mean, is it suffering though, or is it just like, time out? You should just sit here and relax, and your food will come when it comes.
You make new friends.
Right.
You do.
Yeah.
You do.
You mean waiting in the line for 2 hours?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine I have some pretty close friends at that point. But, but people are almost trying to outdo each other in the movie. Like, oh, well, I was here, it was 20 below.
Well,
and
right.
I waited for.
And the other thing is that like the lines happen only at a certain time of day.
Right.
If you go super early, if you go super late, there are no lines.
Well, although there were scenes in the movie of
Yeah.
people lining up before the thing is open too. So
Yeah, the weekend because they went on a weekend.
Well, and
Yeah.
you see that still on the weekend if you go to Worcester Square to kind of sit, or if you go to the farmers market, which is nearby, and then you go over to Worcester Street. I mean, you see hundreds of people, especially as it gets warmer.
So I have to ask one question, Gorman. This came up in the emails, and I think it is a good question. So there are these 3 pizza places that matter. They're all within easy walking distance of one another. Pepe's now is like in other places. How do you feel about that?
I don't really consider those the offshoots to be real Pepe's.
Yeah.
I consider and honestly, if I'm going to go to Pepe's, I really prefer to go to the Spot, which is the original oven in back at a parking lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, a few of them. The one in Waterbury, probably because of the number of Italians that live in Waterbury, is
Right.
actually quite good. The one at the casino, which is the only other one I've been to, is like the Disneyland version. You have
Right.
to actually ask for it to be cooked.
Right. Good food at this
Yeah.
casino. Very hard to come by anyway. So, all right. Well, we should probably stop there. There's so much more, and so when you see this movie, which you probably will, you'll learn a lot about ovens. You'll hear some wild speculation about water, and you'll hear kind of the pizza equivalent of terroir being discussed. So you'll learn about all kinds of things about pizza that you don't know. And the movie, of course, is Pizza: A Love Story, coming up at the New Haven Documentary Film Festival. That's the last weekend in May, first weekend in June, sort of right in there somewhere. We've told you all about it. We're going to take a little break. We'll come back. We'll endorse some things.
Pizza boys here. I got your red hot pizza, and I hope you got the beer.
So I guess this would be the wrong time to mention that I recently had pizza with Sting, Hammer, and Bono at one of the non-New Haven Pepe's. By the way, Sting, Hammer, and Bono are now touring as kind of the new Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Today's show is produced by Jonathan McMozzarella and me, Kyone Wolf. The part of Bill Curry was played by Billy Joel. On Monday's show, we'll tackle the weekend's news with The Scramble. And now, back to Colin.
All right, now time for our panel to make some endorsements. So why don't we start with Lucy Gelman?
Okay, I have 2. The first, I mentioned this, NPR does a sort of a weekly music roundup, and they recently profiled Jamila Woods' new album, which is called Legacy. There are exclamation points in there, so I think I'm saying it wrong. It's really good. Folks should listen. But then, while we're on the topic of pizza, and Gorman may think this is blasphemous, but I really want to endorse Next Door New Haven, which is across from Jocelyn Square on Humphrey Street. It's there are 2 chefs over there, Doug Coffin, who for years has run the Big Green Pizza Truck, and then Chef Robin Bodak, who is leading a team of either all or mostly female chefs, which is actually really rare in the restaurant industry. The food there is exceptional. It's really fun, and both Doug and Robin come out and talk to patrons. It's become, in like less than a year, a very special place for me, and I can't recommend it highly enough.
Again, the place is called Next Door?
Next Door, New Haven.
Yeah.
For people who live in New Haven, it's the old Humphreys, and it actually is quite good. It's got one of the best plain pies I've had outside of the Trinity.
So that is high praise.
Yes.
So that is very high praise. All right, Brian, you want to go next?
Sure. So on the music thing, for those of you who like Vampire Weekend and are wondering where they got their sounds, I would recommend this album by the Bundu Boys, Bundu Boys. It's called The Shed Sessions. It's 2.5 hours of this like amazing alchemy of Zimbabwean and South African pop music that this band got together and knocked out of the park, and it's a great album. The other thing that I would recommend is a specific toppings for New Haven pizzas that I was turned on to recently, which would be red pie, no mutts, clams, and whatever hot peppers they have. And that's it.
Right.
Just those things. And I at one point decided to like eat it at different places, and it It worked every time.
I mean, you're a risk taker, though, because like there's often quite a bit of competition among Italian establishment owners as to who can get the hottest peppers.
I love them all.
Yeah.
I love all of them.
All right. Well, so, Gorman, what are you going to recommend?
I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to promote NH Docs, but not the Pizza Love Story screening, because there's so many amazing films. About half of them are from Connecticut filmmakers. And we are covering every subjects that range from policing in New Haven and in Hartford to the Nathan's hot dog eating contest and everything in between. And there are some amazing musical performances. Fred Hirsch, the classical and jazz pianist, is going to be playing after a documentary that's about him. Van Duren, who was going to be the next big thing, and if you love Big Star, this person will remind you of Big Star. And he put out a couple of albums in the 90s, and he's going to be playing at Cafe 9 after the documentary on him. And we have for other rockers, we have a documentary on Cream magazine, which was, of course, the alternative to Rolling Stone back in the 70s. And it's fun, it's obnoxious, and a bunch of local musicians afterwards at Cafe 9 are going to be doing songs from cover artists. So the festival has so much, and with the exception of the 2 Cafe 9 shows, everything is free.
So, first of all, I should say that I was struggling for an endorsement this week. I don't know why. Maybe I've just either been living a very sheltered life or a very busy life. But I sort of came up with one based on what I thought we would talk about a little bit more. We were emailing a little bit about sort of, things and artists that are cool and then they become not cool. And then sometimes they have the ability to get back to being cool. And like an example would be Tom Jones, who was very cool for a while. And then he was kind of like very out of style and out of fashion. And then I think partly because of the movie Mars Attacks, he kind of, crawled back into, and now I think Tom Jones is pretty cool. So my example is going to be, I think, a perfect example of this is Phil Collins. So Phil Collins was the drummer for Genesis, which is at that time, particularly for somebody like John Dankosky, that would be a really cool thing to be the drummer for Genesis. Then Peter Gabriel left Genesis. Phil Collins came out to be the front man, and then he kind of discovered himself as a vocalist and as a star. He went off on his own, and then he started pursuing very, very commercial music and doing very, very commercial music. And people who would have thought that he was cool at the beginning thought he was the opposite of that he was this kind of treacly, self-serving, money-grubbing commercial artist. And were bothered by him more than they might have been bothered by somebody who started out that way, I think. So, but here's the thing. I love redemption. And so the thing that I'm going to endorse is, and I think if you could just Google this pretty easily, on This American Life, Ira Glass's show, there's part of an episode called Dr. Phil. And in it, a woman correspondent who's been through a terrible breakup and is interested in the idea of like the perfect heartbreak song, the perfect song to commemorate a terrible breakup, just the way that Lucy was talking about Vampire Weekend being the soundtrack for a breakup. She winds up getting him on the phone somehow, and he takes this very seriously, and he has a long conversation. He's funny, he's sympathetic, he's human, and I don't think there's any way you can listen to this and not forgive Phil Collins for every bad thing that he ever did, every musical crime you think he might have committed. So that'll be my endorsement today. Just track that down, Dr. Phil, on This American Life, and you will fall back in love with Phil Collins, assuming you ever fell out. Thanks very much to everybody, especially Jonathan McPants, who's down here with us making this whole thing happen in our New Haven studios at Gateway College. And thanks to Lucy and Gorman and Brian, and we'll be back on Monday.
Place to hang out. Yeah. It's cozy, like a Cracker Barrel. Yeah, we all been laughing, talking, joking, talking about this and talking about that, and talk about everything as a matter of fact. Oh yeah. Talk about Torrington, Vernon, Danbury, Waterbury, Alderberry, Woodbury, hitting on New Britain, Vernon, I already said that one, Avon, Farmington, yeah.